Welcome to the Church Answers podcast, sponsored by Cheney and Associates, the accounting firm for the church. And I mean bold letters, capital letters. They are the accounting firm for the church. If you don't have them doing your accounting in your church, consider it, because they're among the best, if not the best. I can vouch for it. I can tell you they've just got incredible, innovative leaders, but they know the local church. That's all they do. They know the local church. They work with 1,100 plus and growing local churches. So work with them. So I'm Tom Rayner. Got with me Jess Rayner. You may have gotten accustomed to the two of us being in the Church Answers podcast. I am kind of excited about this one, Jess. And I don't like it when speakers say, "Hey, I'm really excited about the following," because they say it all the time. Mm-hmm. Usually they say, "We're super excited." And you hear a speaker, "Oh, we're super excited."
Well, they're usually super excited to be there.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be there.
Right.
I'm not super excited to be here. I'm just super excited to share since I am here.
Well, I'm glad you care.
I do care. We're going to talk about putting together some type of outreach ministry, which is a ministry beyond the walls of the church, by going to your demographics, going through your community study. And we're going to take this one step at a time. And I think what you can do, church leaders, whether you're a pastor or other staff or lay leader, is that you can take some notes on maybe the podcast notes. We have them at our site or separately, and you can develop your own outreach plan just by doing this. You can play it again and again and take a team through it. It'll be a fascinating thing to do. So, Jess, I know that we have done, Church Answers has done at least one demographic psychographic study for your church.
Right.
I don't remember the last time we did it. And I remember the big picture of it. And one thing that you've told me is that our community, even though it's incredibly young, is aging. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't have to do with old people as much as it has to do with expensive homes.
Yeah. Yeah. We're seeing a demographic shift in our community. And even before I jump into that, it's super important if you're a church leader to know your community. In fact, in our last episode, we were talking about barriers to overcome. And the very last barrier we talked about was knowing your community. If you don't know your community, you can't reach your community. And so the whole point of us talking about this today is we want to help you overcome potentially, maybe you're facing a growth barrier in your church. Maybe you're declining. Maybe you've plateaued. There's a major need for pastors and church leaders to understand their community. I truly believe that if you don't know it, you can't reach it. So at the Church of Spring Hill, I have been monitoring our demographics. It has been a little bit. I need to run another report. I have past reports and I have other data that I've pulled in. So I feel like I stay connected to the demographic and psychographics of our community, even though I haven't run the Know Your Community report. But I'll do that. That'd be a good way to start off the new year, the Church of Spring Hill. So maybe others will join me in getting a report. But we've had a shift. We have aged, and it's because of this. And you already said it. So it's home values. But what's driven up our home values? Well, we've had an influx of Californians that have come and Northerners. I'm seeing more and more, Detroit, New York. We're seeing more of those. They're coming in. And what they have to buy houses is cash, because California is way more expensive. They sell their house like, oh, I can buy a house.
I've got one or two houses in Spring Hill.
And it's just driven up our real estate market, which has pushed out some of the younger demographic. I mean, it very quickly. So the younger demographic we have are typically people who've been here over 5 years, over 6 years.
That bought the house when it was a lower price.
And so very quickly, because of that, now there's a barrier to entry in our community. We have aged, and we're getting a lot of empty nesters as well. And so our demographic has shifted, and our church has shifted as well. We've seen this shift in demographics as well. So even those who got in early, had young families, they are aging. And so we're not seeing the replacement as fast as we're getting older. On top of that, we've had a political shift. We're Middle Tennessee. You would think it would be very, staunch, red, staunch conservative. Spring Hill, Tennessee is actually moderate politically.
Hmm.
And so we've had some demographic shifts, we've had some financial shifts, we've also had some political shifts. And so you're understanding the demographic. And so that has caused us to think about some of the ministries we have. It's caused us to think about some of the things I'm leading toward. It's caused us to invest more in our student ministry than we ever have because of the aging demographic. We're seeing more and more high schoolers and middle schoolers in our community. That's growing faster than our elementary age kids.
Mm-hmm.
And if the elementary is still bigger, but high school is growing at a faster rate.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're investing more. It's changing our budget. All that to say is, like, if I wasn't paying any attention to this, if I was just kind of like, oh, here we go, another year, then I would have missed all these opportunities. And not that we've necessarily capitalized on all these opportunities, but at least I have an awareness of what's going on that I can begin to potentially lead the church towards reaching the community. So
I've heard you say more than one time that you could not afford to buy your house.
Yeah, that is true. That's one of the things that's happened. Yes, we were very fortunate. We bought several years ago, and our housing value we got in the right time. And not only, I don't know if I would, we could not afford. Well, we would not choose to buy the how much our house would be. Could we afford it? Yes, but it would not be a choice. I would not spend as much as my house is worth right now. But that's a whole other thing of why.
And hey, by the way, that's another demographic reality. Millennials are moving slower than they used to, less than they used to, because many of them are in your situation.
Yeah. It is that the housing market has changed, and so it's causing millennials to stay.
When we wrote the book called The Millennials, we didn't even know that factor. It wasn't even part of it.
Right. And 2020 had a major part in that in the past, 4 or 5 years. So, but all that say is, I can say all that because I'm aware. And if you want to overcome a growth barrier, it starts by understanding your demographics, your psychographics. It starts by having a know your community report and beginning to develop an outreach plan from that. So, starting point, get to know your community report.
And let me just highlight some things here. I would say get a demographic psychographic report. And there are a lot of choices out there. Most of them are tied to denominations that do them. We offer what I think is the best, and that's my prejudice, but I haven't seen anyone challenge it yet. Call Know Your Community. But I'm simply saying get a demographic report, first of all. We really like our Know Your Community report.
Sure.
We've worked on it for years. In fact, we update it every single year because we use the Esri data. And so it's always current. So I like ours. I like I Know Your Community. But get a report that has two elements in it. Demographics, who the people are, male, female, socioeconomic class, gender. Well, I said male and female. How you describe people, who they are. And then the other part is psychographics, what they're thinking, what they believe, what they desire. So you need both of those elements. Ours has both elements. There are others that do, but I really like what we've done because we've taken all of that demographic data from Esri, which is the big data company that supplies it worldwide. And we've taken that and we've adjusted it precisely for the things that we see in churches today and the needs. That's all the background data. So tell us how you chose your demographic report. I know it's Know Your Community. Did you use a census tract? Did you use a zip code? Tell us what area you used.
Yeah. You're talking about how do I define my community? Is that okay? Yeah, and I think this is super important too, because even if you're running after a demographic or psychographic report, you can get too much data, and it doesn't really become helpful to you at that point. So one of the things I love about the Know Your Community report is that you can actually, based off your demographic area, like the area you want to know about it, based off drive time, which is the reality of, I think, how you define a community. I get there's some natural, land markers, there's highway systems, there's things that you can say, but the real question is, how far would someone drive to come to my church? At the end of the day, that's kind of what it breaks down to. And so if you're in a rural setting, you're in an urban setting, those numbers can change dramatically. The time can be, how far would someone drive? You're probably a bit of an anomaly. You drive about 35 minutes to come, 30 minutes to come to our church.
That's because I'm married and I have a son.
Yes, yeah. So but most people are going to be within 15 minutes. I know we have some that are we have some that are 45 minutes. Some that are 30 minutes, 25 minutes. But in large part, I say everyone is 15 minutes or less. And so I would base, and I have in the past, in fact, I'm going to run a new report at the beginning of the year. 15 minutes. How many people exist within a 15-minute drive time? So it takes in consideration of highways, roads, it takes it all in consideration and defines your community, because if you don't accurately define that, the data really isn't helpful at that point. Because
So
if you're pulling for the next town over, what is that going to do for you?
yeah, so you usually use the 15-minute drive time,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the most common. We can do zip codes.
Right.
We can do census tracts. We can do custom polygons, which basically means you draw your community. We can do all those, but I think drive time is by far the best.
Well, think about it. If people are searching for your church, where are they going? They're going to Google. They're gonna type in, whatever the city name is, churches or churches near me, and then what are the results they're gonna get?
Yeah,
It's
proximity.
Google Maps. How far does it take to get there? And so if the people are finding your church that way, then you need to define your community that way. So you can do the other ones. I wouldn't recommend it.
Well, again, we'll give you a link to Know Your Community report. I just wanted to be transparent that there are others out there, usually provided by denominations and otherwise. They're not, but we like ours, and I'll just stop on that one. Okay, so start with what your community is, and then get a demographic and psychographic report. That's the second one, and we are recommending the report, ours, called Know Your Community, but get something.
Mm-hmm.
Get something. So let's go to this third point. Kind of rush through those, but start with the survey. Oh, by the way, I need to go back to number one.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. And we may have flipped this a little bit because this is my fault. I had said start with that. Start with a Know Your Community report, just because I do believe that. But maybe 1A and 1B.
No, let's do this. Our show notes have one, which is start with something to know your church. Let's just move that to 3.
Okay.
We can ask Alana just to move the first bullet point to become the third bullet point.
There we
go. That way we don't have to explain it away that we started at another point. So we also recommend a report to help you know your church.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a survey of your church. Mm-hmm. The one we have is what does your church members believe? And it's a long report. It takes probably 30 minutes for a church member to fill it out because it's like 130 questions, you obviously do it on your computer and you go through it pretty quickly, but you do that. That helps a lot because you can know where your people are. You can understand what they're thinking about, and it's not just doctrinal. It's what I think about my fellowship, what I think about the ministries that are going on in my church. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of areas. Or you can do just a specific doctrinal report called Know Your Beliefs. That's a shorter report. Either one of those, right, is a good place to start. I'm just saying, if you're going to your community, you need to know where your people are as well, because what you're trying to do, in the sense of reaching them, you're trying to match them. You're trying to say, these are my people. This is the community. Let's match them together.
Yeah, I think most pastors are like, well, I know my church. I know my church. I'll say this: we ran in the past 12 months. We ran a Know Your Beliefs report here at my church, and there were a few things that were very eye opening, and it was like, oh, okay. And I think it was more like when it comes to theology, there's just some things that need to be more focused on teaching. It wasn't maybe misalignment of theology. It was more of a lack of knowledge.
It was a definitional issue, probably.
Yeah. And so, but that was eye-opening. But when you take that, and if you do know your beliefs, if you do know your church, you're going to find things that you weren't expecting. And so if you're developing an outreach plan and you're going out there and you're saying, hey, I'm gonna know my community. I'm gonna know what they think. I'm know what I feel, and then you're gonna bring it to your church. But you don't maybe fully know your church. You may not be able to craft the best outreach plan. Yeah. And so that's why if you can couple both of these together, to know your church and know your community, and use those two tools to begin to develop your outreach plan as a foundational piece, that's when you're really setting yourself up for success.
One of the things that Know Your Community provides is tapestry segments. Now, that
Mm-hmm.
just sounds like some kind of foreign word. But what it does is, I cannot remember how many tapestry segments are identified in the United States. 50, 60, something like that.
I think it's more than that.
It could be.
It's a lot.
And it basically, let me talk to some of you old people like me. Do some of you remember, and I know you can't respond because this is a podcast, do some of you remember how Rick Warren got started at Saddleback decades ago? Probably not. One of the things he did was he did a ton of demographic work. Even before the church was started, he did a ton of finding out who is in the community. And then he started going door to door to find out what their hurts and needs were. And so he got the demographics from, I believe, the local chamber at the time. It was
Okay.
rough demographics, and he got the psychographics by going door to door and finding out what people's needs were. And so he began to design what the typical person in our church is like, in our community is like. And he identified that person as Saddleback Sam. And he said, now, we are not just reaching Saddleback Sam. I just want you to get this image of who is in our community so you can know our community. He was criticized some because you're saying, oh, you're only going to reach people like you. No, that's not what he was doing. He's trying to understand the community and communicate it to the church.
Right.
Ministry tapestry segments does that, but does it a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
It takes all of this data about your community and says, let me tell you about your community. Let me tell you who is there. Let me give an example of what they do on a daily basis. It is an unbelievable breakdown of taking all the data and then saying, this is really how our people live. This is where they are. This is who their neighbors are. And it's an amazing thing at the end of our reports.
Yeah. And actually you're pretty close. There's 67 tapestry segments.
Oh, okay. I
thought it was a lot more, but you were right. I was wrong.
I was shooting from the hip. I didn't really know.
67 tapestry segments. And so what happens when you run through a Know Your Community report, you actually receive these tapestry segments so that you can see, predominant groupings in your community. To keep you the analogy, you kind of see your different Saddleback Sams. So whatever community in, whatever, you'll see the top 3 or 4 groupings. And so it doesn't necessarily define it in a single person, but gives you these segmentations that are your most, prominent in your community. And that's really helpful too. You could,
do you by any chance have one accessible? No?
Say it again.
Do you have one in front of you? I'm just asking the question. I don't. A tapestry segment. I don't.
Oh, of what a tapestry segment is?
I'm just reading it off.
Yeah. So let's go with tapestry segment 2B, which is Pleasantville. It's the name of it.
All right.
Here is the average household size of this life mode group is 2.88. The median age is 42.6 with a median household income of $92,900. So if you have this, depending on you may not have anyone in this tapestry segment. You may run your report. You may be a rural community. You have 0% of people who fall into the Pleasantville tapestry segments. But you could also have, where you are, Dad, where you're located.
Yeah.
It's just, you would probably find a good bit of people who are in the Pleasantville tapestry segments.
Yeah.
And so, when you pull this up, it tells you about the socioeconomic traits. It tells you about their education. It tells you about, what they're thinking, what their spare time is. They like to shop online from upscale to discount. It talks about consumer driven types of media they consume. And so you begin to see just in one tapestry segments, say this makes up 20% of your demographic that you're looking in. It's like, oh, okay, that's 1 out of 5 people fall into this segment. You begin to understand them a little bit more.
I encourage church leaders to keep on going down the ministry segments, tapestry segments, until they get to at least 50%. It may take 4 or 5, but at least 50%. It may take 1 or 2.
You say to reach one segment that has 50%?
No, to the cumulative number of segments total 50%, at least
Okay.
50%.
Right.
So you can at least know what half of your community looks like. You can dig more deeply, but
Yeah.
once you start getting in single digits, 8% of our community is this tapestry segment. You probably don't need to waste a whole lot of time on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And my guess is you typically, unless you're a very urban setting, heavily dense population, you might have to not scroll down that far. I remember there's one church we worked with recently, that they had one tapestry segment.
Wow. Was it
Had-
rural?
it was very rural. It was like, this is our people. Like, this is it. Like, everything else said 0%. And so typically, I mean, you're going to find a handful that I think will make up at least 50%, if not more. So, and two, there's commonalities with them. So even they take tapestry segments, and we take it and we actually group them together. So you have 4 or 5 tapestry segments in this particular grouping. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a good chance within one particular grouping, you're going to have 3 or 4 that make up 50, 60%. You're going to very quickly be able to see the lifestyle, the thoughts, the socioeconomic status of your community by running this report.
If this sounds messy or complex to you, it's really pretty easy. You run the report, and I would look right at the beginning of our report. We have a summary, we have infographics, and
Right.
so you can just get summary information. There's a lot of detail. I hardly ever get into the detail. I get into the highlights, and then at the end of the report, it's a list of the segments, and you can get a good view of your community by going through this report in 30 minutes. And it's not thorough, but you can start and get to know your community right away.
Yep. If you're a church leader and you listen to this, like I feel like I'm repeating myself. You got to do it. You got to know your community. It's so helpful. It's a perspective shift.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
The next point are age and ethnic differences. Again, this is not a targeting; it's just a knowledge of who is there. And for example, your older brother, of course, he's Mr. Know Your Community, so he obviously does this a lot for his church. And he found how rapidly the Hispanic population was growing, and as a intentionality, they made a shift toward bringing Hispanic leadership on staff.
Mm.
And by putting this, what has now become the largest grouping in his community, in his neighborhoods, that has drawn a number of probably 3 or 4 different Hispanic populations have come in now. And the way I'm looking at it, going there, on a Sunday every 5 or 6 months, it looks like it's just becoming more and more Hispanic. They're doing it by design, and they do have a Spanish-speaking service, but the greatest growth is just in the English-speaking who come to the services everybody else does. So that's an example of ethnic differences. Your example was age differences that you gave.
Yeah, we don't have as much diversity where we are, and in fact, I think it's actually gotten, for lack of better words, it's gotten worse, just because of what's happening with our property values, and so we've kind of we're very similar in my community, but you got to know it. You got to know it because if you're a church that has plateaued or declined, there's a good chance your community has changed around you and you haven't changed. You're talking about Sam, he's paying attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
The community around him is changing, and so he's making sure the church is representing the community. And that means you have to, if we're talking about an outreach plan, right, you might have to do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, they do.
You might have to lead your church to be more open and to say, hey, you might have to change a few things. You might have to, change this ministry, start this ministry. You're gonna have to do some things. But what a demographic and psychographic report, it helps you cast the vision of the why behind it. It gives that hard data to say, here's what's happening in our community. And that begins to allow you to be able to lead your church to it. And that's why it's important. Know your church, who they are, what are they thinking, what are they feeling? Know your community. Oh my goodness, we have a difference. We have an age gap. We have an ethnic gap. We have a racial gap. We got to figure out what is happening. Where's the trend going? Is it going one direction? We don't want to become a church where we stay the same, but our community changes.
Yep. And this is not about quotas. This is about being the community where you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just simple as that.
And I'll say this, there are some churches out there that say, you know what, we're probably not going to reach this demographic. So they'll move, and then they'll allow another opportunity for another church to come in, take over their building, do those things. So it's like, but you have to make that decision ahead of time. You can't, we are not an age where you can be reactive anymore. You have to be proactive in understanding your community and your church together.
I know you don't remember the church in St. Pete, so I'm talking to you when you were very young, ma'am. This was probably 88, early 89. So you were 3 going on 4 at the time. So you don't remember this, but demographics were incredibly vital to know at this time. The transition that was taking place was that our older neighborhood was becoming a newer neighborhood. And wealthier people were coming into the neighborhood, and they were moving into these homes, remodeling them. And these were homes that were probably 1,400 to 2,000 square feet. So they were expanding upon them. And we saw that transition take place. And we were able to get a demographic report then. It was hard to find one, but we were able to get one then. And we made some strategic moves, but we did not make it according to wealth. That would have been one of the things that we discovered, that the community is getting more wealthy because of these people who are coming in, buying these whole homes from the less affluent people who were living there and selling them at a significant profit. But what was happening to our neighborhood, it was becoming less biblical traditional. And so the people in our neighborhood that year one, when I was there, I was only there 3 years, but it changed fast. Year one, when I was there, they were traditional Bible Belt people.
Okay. I was curious what you meant, less biblical traditional. I didn't know what you meant by that, but
okay. The group that was moving out was really Bible Belt.
Okay.
And you reach them by doing the things that you do to reach Bible Belt people, which is usually common vernacular, common lifestyle, common values. And then this other group moved in, and they were just hardcore unchurched. They weren't bad people. Well, I guess theologically we all are, but they weren't bad people. And we had to shift significantly. And our growth came from that shift where we started talking about, okay, these are people that don't even know about church. How do we reach them?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, this was so many years ago, but it's like you could start a class that says, hey, who is Jesus?
Yep.
That wouldn't have attracted someone who's in the Bible Belt. Like, why would I don't need to know that. I know who Jesus is, but for someone who's unchurched, and that may have been a great thing. Just who's Jesus teaching. So you were able to do some things. I don't know if that, again, I was 3.
I did something really similar.
Okay.
I did Through the Bible in 1 year.
There you go. What is the Bible?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I started off with what is the Bible, and I ended up doing that introduction and then 66 books of the Bible, and then a closing in 52 weeks or close to it.
Yeah. So yeah, but that's what we're talking about. Even though this is almost 40 years ago, the principle still remains the same.
I got my era. You've got your era.
The principle remains the same. You figured out who your community is. You watched the data. You got the report. Even though it was a lot harder then, a lot easier now. All you have to do is click on a link, and now you can find it.
I had to find a place that would provide it for me. I don't even remember where I got it. It wasn't the Chamber of Commerce. I know that.
Yeah, the principle is the same. You got to know your community to reach your community. If you're going to be intentional about developing an outreach plan, if you're thinking about, the next year, I think this podcast comes out late December.
Yep. I think we mentioned it earlier, December 19th.
Okay, so Merry Christmas.
Happy anniversary.
What's that?
Happy anniversary.
You're speaking not to me.
I'm speaking to myself, December 17th.
Okay, yes. Start off the year. Know your community, know your church. And if you listen to the previous episode, pray.
Yeah.
Get excited.
Put those 2 episodes together.
Yeah, I mean, really, for some reason you picked up on this one, go back to listen to the last one. And put together your outreach plan, run some reports, know your church, know your community, go and then start praying for your community, do the Hope Initiative.
Boy, you're getting ahead of us, Jess.
I'm sorry, am I? I'm just getting excited.
Yes.
Yeah, you wrote some notes down. I'm going off script, but you're beginning to see the picture here. It starts to come together.
Well, the two resources that I have here, one of them is Good News Neighbors Toolkit. And basically, it's a fun thing for your church to do. They go to your members of your community and they just give them a gift.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't want anything else. And it explains what kind of gifts are best and it's an entire package of how to do this. And it developed originally from West Bradenton Church, where they were doing all the demographics and psychographics. They said, let's get into the community. How can we do door knocking without doing door knocking? And they were very successful. And now they do it like every other month. It's just part of their rhythm. They have one group that makes the gifts for them, and then they send them out. So we made that into a resource that I think would be very helpful. And then the Hope Initiative. You mentioned that. The Hope Initiative. Do you remember what you said about what the best thing the Hope Initiative does for a church?
I don't.
Changes the culture.
Oh yeah. Oh, you're less. Yeah. You're asking me a long time ago. That was a previous episode.
The previous episode. I'm sorry to put you back that far, but Hope Initiative combines the power of prayer and the obedience of going, and you pray and go. And it's you can do it a 30-day jump start. I like churches to do longer than that, but a 30-day jump start is extremely helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Going real quickly, going back to the Good News Neighbor Toolkit. That's a super easy one because people love to give away stuff.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier to go knock on a door if you're just saying, hey, welcome, we have a gift for you, here's something free, and people are still skeptical, right? They're gonna be like and then it's just an open door. Literally the door opens to create an open door.
Yes.
A physical door opens for the opportunity for a spiritual door. That's such an easy one.
And if they're not there, or if they don't answer the door, we tell them, hey, have a rubber band or something so you can just put it on there. They can have the gift and say, contact us if you need us.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, if you're thinking about how to develop an outreach plan, I think sometimes it can feel so daunting. It can feel so big. It's like, oh my goodness, I got to do all these things. Well, actually, to start off with, you don't. You just got to run some reports, click on the links below, get the Know Your Church report, get your Know Your Community report. It takes a little bit of work to do the Know Your Church report. It's well worth it. And two, your church is going to be, that to me is a culture shift too. If you do the Know Your Church report, by the way, you're muted.
That's because I keep on coughing.
I can't hear you. If you do the Know Your Church report, it's letting the church know, hey, we're going to work together. Hey, it's not just we're going to do this together. We're going to know each other. We're going to know our community. You can use that as a tone setter to start off, even ending the year, beginning of the year, and then that's going to lead into, hey guys, here's the numbers. Here's the data. Here's the information. Here's what we're up against. Here's some of our challenges, but here's our opportunities. And then it's to go, well, it's Good News Neighbor Toolkit, the Hope Initiative. It makes it so much easier to introduce the outreach plan when you have done the work behind it.
Yep.
But the reality is you don't have to do much work because we've done it for you.
Well, another one, and I keep just throwing resources at the people, but this is what we do. And so you don't have to use our resources. Do the principle behind the resources. But a third one is called Invite Your One. I didn't even have that in the show notes. We'll put it in the show notes as well. And that develops an inviting culture, a culture of invitation. Yep. And the whole purpose is, let's get our church to have one day where we're going to invite people to come, not for high attendance, but just to get them all inviting someone in one day. That was the biggest shift, Jess, at my church in St. Pete.
Okay.
There's kind of I guess you'd call it a memorial room of Thom Rainer still there. The church is almost dead. So
it's weird to say memorial for you.
Well, it's the highlights of when I was there. That sounds pretty pompous. But they did it. It was not me. I came back. And so when I went back for our 50th anniversary of the church, not my 50th anniversary there, but 50th of the church, they designed that room because that was the good old days. And the big picture that they had in there was the packed worship center on Invite Your One Day.
That's cool, but it's also sad.
It is sad. And you know who I invited? I invited the mayor.
That's right. I do remember that.
Yeah.
I do remember that. Yeah. Yeah. It's when you think about just how you begin to do the outreach plan. Invite Your One is a great resource. And if you listen to the previous episode, I know we're referencing a lot, so if you haven't, go back and listen to it.
We've made it into a 2-part episode now.
We unintentionally, but one of the things we talked about is developing a culture of prayer for the lost. And I threw out the idea of like, hey, what if you just have a card that people write their names down and during your prayer time? Well, if you start that, do your Good News Neighbor Toolkit, do your Hope Initiative, second or third quarter, do Invite Your One. That's so easy.
You got your gear done, and it's already most of the work is done.
They've been praying since the beginning, and then when you say, "Hey, go invite them," they're like, "Oh, okay, sure, easy."
And the Hope Initiative has some beginning steps to invite people too, so that works as well.
Yep.
I hope this has been practical. I know it's been practical.
Yeah.
It's been fun with telephone rings interrupting and me coughing and going mute and not knowing I'm mute. But I don't need to edit anything. I feel good just being who we are. So we are on YouTube, so you can give us a rating. You can give us a thumbs up, I should say. You can tell others about us. You can put comments down. Tell us what you're doing, and if you're listening to it on your app, and give us a rating and review there, and give some comments on the website where we have all of our show notes as well. Jess, any final thoughts before we wrap this up? Before my voice goes completely, or before someone else calls me and wants to offer me Medicare at a new discounted rate?
My only word of caution I would end with is I know, and maybe I'm making it sound too easy and too simplistic. Developing an outreach plan is not. It takes work. The point I'm making is we at Church Answers have done a lot of the work for you.
Exactly.
But it still requires a lot to lead a church through it, especially when it comes to spiritual warfare. So if you're here and you're going, hey, I think I need to do this, let me encourage you, before you put pen to paper, before you start typing anything, just get on your knees before the Lord and start praying.
Absolutely.
We, here at the Church of Spring Hill, we've seen a lot of people come to Christ recently.
I've loved it.
Absolutely amazing. But it has come with a lot of spiritual warfare. So that being said, the tools are out there. The tools are easy to execute on, but it does not take away the weight of the work. In the year with prayer, with excitement, and then run after it. Have fun with it.
Yeah.
Because it's when you're working and you're doing outreach as a church, when a church family comes together to reach people with the gospel of Jesus Christ, it's a lot of fun.
I agree. Hey, audience, you're a lot of fun. You put up with a lot just by listening to my snorts and sneezes and coughing and forgetfulness and don't know if push buttons. I got to push buttons. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your faithfulness to listen to us, to watch us. We're so appreciative. We wouldn't be here, couldn't be here if it weren't for you. So thank you for being a part of the Church Answers podcast. As always, Jess and I will be here. I'll be here almost every week. Jess will be here almost every week. And we love talking to you about all things church, especially local church, the bride of Christ. I hope you have a good 2025. I think we have at least one more week or two before 2025 comes in here, but I hope your new year is a blessed year, and we're blessed to have you as a part of the Church Answers family. We'll see you next week as we continue to talk about all things local church.